Hello, Kipsters. Happy Friday. I'm so excited to have you join on today to figure out what ends up happening with Irene. As always, you can get your favorite stuffy to read with you or someone to read our story with us, but today we're going to jump right in because I want us to finish the whole book today. Yesterday, we were focusing on looking at what Irene was doing, what Irene was, and what she was saying, what she was, to figure out how Irene feels. Today what we're going to focus on is looking at the pictures, to figure out how Irene feels. Does anyone remember the fancy word for pictures? The fancy word for pictures is what? You're right, illustrations. Illustrations in the story help us know how Irene feels. Today, while I'm reading, your job is to look at the pictures or illustrations to figure out how Irene feels. Let's go ahead and jump in. Yesterday, when we were reading, I put my bookmark on this page because this was the last page that we read. We read about how Irene had just had the beautiful gown flying into the wind, and she was feeling very upset. Let's go ahead and continue reading to see what ends up happening with Irene. She went shuffling through the snow. Would her mother understand, she wondered, that it was the wind's fault, not hers? Would the Duchess be angry? The wind was howling like a wild animal. Suddenly, Irene stepped in a hole and fell over with a twisted ankle. She blamed it on the wind. "Keep quiet," she scolded. "You've done enough damage already. You've spoiled everything. The wind swallowed up her words. She sat in the snow in great pain, afraid she wouldn't be able to go on, but she managed to get to her feet and start moving. It hurt. Home, where she longed to be, where she and her mother could be warm together, was far behind. It's got to be closer to the palace, she thought, but where any place was in all the snow, she couldn't be sure. Now I'm looking at the pictures and I'm thinking, how does Irene feel right now? How is Irene feeling right now by looking at the picture? Irene feels She plowed on, dragging furrows with her sore foot. The short winter day was almost done. Am I still going the right way? She wondered. There was no one around to advise her. Whoever else there was in the snow-covered world was far, far away and safe indoors, even the animals in their burrows. She went on, puddling on. Soon night took over. She knew in the dark that the muffled snow was still falling. She could feel it. She was cold and alone in the middle of nowhere. Irene was lost. She had to keep moving. She was hoping she'd come to a house, any house at all, and be taken in. She was badly needed to be in someone's arms. The snow was above her knees now. She shoved her way through it, clutching the empty box. Looking at the pictures, we're thinking, how is Irene feeling? She was asking how a small person could keep this struggle up when she realized it was getting lighter. There was a soft glow coming from somewhere below her. She waddled towards the glow and soon was gazing down a long slope at the brightly lit mansion. It had to be the palace. Irene pushed forward with all her strength, and swoosh, thump, she plunged downward and was buried. She had fallen off a little cliff. Only her hat in the box in her hand stuck out above the snow. Even if she could call for help, no one would hear her. Her body shook. Her teeth chattered. Why not freeze to death, she thought, and let these terrible troubles end? Why not? She was already buried. Kipsters, looking at the picture, how does Irene feel here? Turn that page. And never see her mother's face again? Her good mother who smelled like freshly baked bread? An explosion of fury, she flung her body about to free herself and was finally able to climb up on her knees and look around. How to get down to that glittering palace? As soon as she raised the question, she had an answer. I'm looking here. Wow, that face looks really, really upset. I think Irene feels upset here. She laid the box down and climbed aboard, but it pressed into the snow and stuck. She tried again, and this time, instead of climbing on, she leaped. The box shot forward like a sled. The wind raced after Irene, but couldn't keep up. In a moment, she would be with people again, inside where it was warm. The sled slowed and jerked to a stop in paving stones. The time had come to break the bad news to the Duchess. With the empty box clasped to her chest, Irene strode nervously towards the palace. Hipsters, I noticed something changed here. We have Irene's face over here in the picture looking like this, and now Irene's face looks like this. How can we say that Irene is feeling by looking at the picture? Irene feels, I don't just want to say happy, because she's still nervous. She has to tell the Duchess about the dress, but she kind of looks like she's like suddenly thinking that maybe everything's going to be okay. Maybe she's feeling hopeful. But then her feet stopped moving and her mouth fell open. She stared. Maybe this was impossible, yet there it was, a little way off over to the right, hugging the trunk of a tree. The beautiful ball gown! The wind was holding it there. "Mama!" Irene shouted. "Mama, I found it!" She managed somehow, despite the wind's meddling, to get the gown off the tree and back in its box. And in another moment, she was at the door of the palace. She knocked twice with the big brass knocker. The door opened and she burst in. I'm wondering how Irene's feeling now. Turn that page. She was welcomed by cheering servants and a delirious Duchess. They couldn't believe she had come over the mountain in such a storm, all by herself. She had to tell the whole story, every detail, and she did. Then she asked to be taken right back to her sick mother, but it was out of the question, they said. The road that ran around the mountain wouldn't be cleared until morning. "Don't fret, child," said the Duchess. "Your mother is surely sleeping now. We'll get you there first thing tomorrow." Irene was given a good dinner as she sat by the fire, the moisture steaming off her clothes. The Duchess, meanwhile, got into her freshly ironed gown before the guests began arriving in their sleds. How do you think that Irene is feeling now? How is Irene feeling now? Irene is feeling... Turn that page. What a wonderful ball it was! The Duchess in her new gown was like a bright star in the sky. Irene in her ordinary dress was radiant. She was swept up into dances by handsome aristocrats who kept her feet off the floor to spare her ankle. Her mother would enjoy hearing all about it. Say, turn that page. Early the next morning, when the snow had long since ceased falling, Mrs. Babin woke from a good night's sleep, feeling much improved. She hurried about and got up the fire going on the cold stove. Then she went to look in on Irene. "Where is my child?" Mrs. Babin cried. She whipped on her coat and to go out to find her. When she pulled the door open, a wall of draft faced her, but peering over it, sorry, Kipsters, I know that that's probably loud. When she pulled the door open, a wall of draft faced her, but peering over it, she could see a horse-drawn sleigh harnessing up in the path. And seated on the sleigh between two large footmen was Irene herself, asleep but smiling. Would you like to hear the rest? So looking here, this character right here is feeling something when she looks and Irene isn't there. And Irene's sleeping right here. Well, there was a bearded doctor in the back of the sleigh, and the Duchess had sent Irene's mother a ginger cake with white icing, some orange and a pineapple, and spice candy of many flavors, along with a note saying how much she cherished her gown and what a brave and loving person Irene was. Which, of course, Mrs. Babin already knew. Better than the Duchess. Thank you for the story. Thank you very much. Woohoo! Kipsters. I'm looking here and Irene is feeling something now that she is all done. Now that she is all feeling better and she's got the doctor there to help her mother. Now, Kipsters, when we went in the story today, our focus was on the illustrations or the pictures to figure out how Irene, our character, was feeling. We looked at the pictures to see how does Irene feel on every page. There was many pictures where Irene was looking like this. Here, Irene felt... Why did she feel that way? What kept happening to her? Irene felt because... But then, as the story continued and more things happened where she was able to get to the palace, she then felt because she... Kipsters, I would love for you to draw a picture and explain how she felt at the beginning of the story and how she felt at the end of the story. You can feel free to text your teacher with that drawing and those words showing us how Irene's feelings changed in the story. Thank you so much for reading with me. I hope you have a wonderful, wonderful weekend, and we'll be back next week for some more learning. I love and miss you.